From John Jones being involved in a hit-and-run accident to Conor McGregor ambushing Khabib's bus, there have been more than a few times UFC fighters went too far. Let's start off with John Jones. You better believe he has a laundry list of times he went too far. In 2014, for example, the Nevada Athletic Commission fined John Jones $50,000 for his fight with Daniel Cormier. In case you don't remember, first they got into a fight after a press meeting. And then, to make matters worse, after Cormier threatened to spit on John, he told DC in a virtual face-to-face conversation that he would kill him. And he did 40 hours of work for the neighborhood for that gesture. The next thing you know, the man tests positive for cocaine and goes to rehab for one night. Come 2015, Jones was in a car crash where he ran into someone's car and drove away. A pregnant woman who was driving the car he hit was hurt. After a few hours, the fighter turned himself into the cops and the UFC took his title away. Look at that honesty. He was given a term of 18 months of probation. But months later, he'd be jailed in Albuquerque for breaking probation. Then there was the time in 2016 when Jones also tested positive for a drug and said he took medicine for sexual dysfunction. Before you ask, things don't just end there. Jones was in a strip club incident in Albuquerque in 2019. And in 2020, he was stopped for driving while drunk. The police also stopped him on the Las Vegas Strip because of an incident of domestic violence in 2021. Bones took a tremendous headbutt to the officer's car. The charges were dropped, but he had to pay for the damage and go to therapy to learn how to control his anger. And the next fighter might not be as bad as Jones, but he sure did make things worse for him. I'm talking about Paul Daly. From my point of view, he's always been one of the most interesting people in mixed martial arts. Not because he's a great martial artist, but because he isn't. But he can knock someone out with one punch, and he also has a very bad attitude. I think he's worth watching because of these two things, even though his wrestling defenses let him down at key points in his career. One of those points was his fight with Josh Koscheck at UFC 113. Koscheck smothered Daly for 3 rounds, which made Daly angry and led to a majority decision for Koscheck. After the fight, Daly gave Koscheck a surprise punch in the face, which got him kicked out of the UFC. Does Daly feel bad about what happened? He sure does. But you know, he says there's a reason for everything. You might wonder, why did Daly hit Koscheck in the first place? I've never gotten a good answer to this question other than anger, which is understandable. Besides that, Paul also chalked it up to Josh punking him out on national TV and how he had to get even. But look where it got him. A direct ticket out of the UFC. Which is kind of unfair since the beef went both ways. The opponents went back and forth all night long with their trash talking. The only problem is, Koscheck's verbal exchanges got to Paul, and he promised him that he'd punch him, and, well, you know the rest. Speaking of beef, this list is incomplete without including the man himself, the Irishman. Conor McGregor really did go far with Khabib Nurmagomedov outside the octagon. UFC 229 saw one of the most exciting fights of 2018. But the dirty game had started well before the actual fight. His first exchange against the Russian came at UFC 205 in 2016 during the pre-match weigh-ins, and that went viral on the internet. Fans were hyping them up, while Khabib was poking fun at the Irishman for being afraid to fight him. The drama that followed had McGregor warmed up, as Khabib slapped his training partner after he insulted him to his face. The Notorious went back at him, surrounding Khabib's bus and making a scene over there. McGregor had been making fun of Khabib's family and his religious beliefs before the fight, which isn't allowed in any sport simply because it's disrespectful. However, that didn't lead to any fines or suspensions. The Irishman remained firm in his questionable ways of getting into his opponent's head. But unfortunately for him, this time he couldn't see his way through inside the octagon. McGregor saw himself losing, panicked, and resorting to cheating. First, it was locking his toes in the grill to force Khabib back while he was trying to grab him. And then, when he tried climbing the cage to join the fight outside the octagon. He was warned by the referee a couple of times, but even the ref didn't take any strict action. The two took the fight out of the cage after the fight ended when McGregor tapped out of the Russian's chokehold. McGregor faced a suspension for 6 months along with a $50,000 fine. Khabib, meanwhile, was fined $500,000 with a 9-month suspension. This is a prime example of him breaking the rules. They weren't the only fighters who have been suspended. Mike Perry sure did pay for his actions too. The UFC says it is troubled by what boxer Mike Perry did when he got into a physical fight at a bar and yelled racial slurs. The fight was caught on video. After a video of Perry punching a man in a Texas restaurant surfaced online in 2020, the UFC said in a statement that Perry has apologized and committed to immediately seek professional treatment, including substance and behavioral counseling. The UFC said that it wouldn't give Perry's next fight during those days. Perry, his team, and the UFC had agreed to evaluate Perry's next step after he finishes his treatment program. This was according to a statement from the promotion. No one has been arrested or charged, but the Lubbock Police Department is looking into one account of minor assault against Perry. ESPN got a copy of the incident report, which said that Perry hit more than one person at Table 82 in Lubbock. A video of Perry, who was 28 years old at the time, punching an older guy to the ground went viral on social media. In the aftermath of the fight, Perry could be heard yelling racial slurs. Perry has been honest about getting in trouble with the law in the past. For example, he spent 6 months in jail in Florida for breaking his sentence. Court records show that Perry was on probation for theft in 2014 when he was arrested for battery. This violated his probation and he was sent to jail. Perry really did tick as many boxes as he could. Racism, theft, assault, and whatnot. Definitely a dark character. The last one may be hurtful to some of you. UFC legend Anderson Silva did cross the line twice. Anderson Silva is a well-known UFC fighter, but his career was in danger after the UFC said in a short news release that Silva failed an out-of-competition drug test in October 2017. He was no longer going to fight Kevin Gastelum on November 25th in Shanghai. The UFC started to look for someone else to fight Gastelum. This wasn't the legend's first time. Silva was also banned for a year by the Nevada Athletic Commission in 2015, after he failed a test for anabolic steroids after a fight with Nick Diaz at UFC 183. Silva was thought to be harmless, but if the B sample turned out to be positive, he could have been banned for life. If the UFC fighter broke the UFC's anti-doping policy a second time, he would get at least a 2-year suspension and probably a 4-year ban. By that, you know what it means. If Silva, who's 42 years old, got a 4-year ban, it would be the end of his career. There was no word from the UFC about what drug Silva tested positive for. So, from the fight between McGregor and Khabib outside the octagon, to Perry punching a man on the street and yelling racial slurs, these were times UFC fighters went too far.